Productivity is all about planning, and health and safety should be, I'm assuming, is all about planning as well. But they're two different streams within an organisation, and very rarely does one department talk to the other. Health and safety, in my experience, has always been a necessary evil, and that's how it's been built. So the health and safety guy is kind of the guy who you don't want to see, you don't want to talk to, because he's just going to get you in trouble. And that's where I think it breaks down at the very beginning. It's communication within businesses.
Hey, and welcome to the Electrical Safety Podcast. I'm your host, John Travis, and today I'm speaking with David Hesketh. David, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we, I guess we met on LinkedIn, and I was telling you earlier, there's some interesting stuff we were chatting about, and I thought maybe you could come on and share some of those ideas with our audience, and so maybe just to kind of get the ball rolling. Actually, I'll just ask you this, because this might be an easy way to think about it. So you were kind of talking about how safety and productivity actually intersect. A lot of people kind of look at them as separate things. And so if you were to kind of start, at a basic level, and maybe you could even just tell people, how you got started and how your thinking got to this way. And, what does that mean kind of in plain English?
Well, my life story, if you like, as an electrician, I started in underground coal mining, served my apprenticeship there, and then after about 15 years, left that industry and wandered into general contracting, basically working as a self-employed one-man band electrician. So that teaches people a lot. When you're only as good as your last job, you're only as good as when you get paid, you need recommendations, you've got all the stresses and strains of being, like your own procurement officer, you're your own time manager, you're your own accountant, you're everything. And you don't realise how many skills that you actually pick up being a self-employed one-man band, if you like. Then that grew, and I grew to a certain size over a number of years, which was great. So then you're dealing with people, and you think you assume that people know what you know, but assuming does make an ass out of you and me. So you've got all that stress and strains of making sure that not only are you doing things correctly, that they're doing things correctly. And then when you brought a few apprentices in, which is that's the bit I like the most, really, is passing on my experience and working practices to the younger crowd, and hopefully teaching them the right way to do things. I must confess, from an health and safety aspect, it was the last thing on my mind when I was a self-employed guy, because it costs money. At the end of the day, health and safety, it costs money. And when you're on your own and you're kind of responsible to yourself, you tend to take risks that, looking back, you think, what on earth was I thinking when I was doing all these silly things? But like when you've got men and apprentices, then you can't act that way. So you've got to take health and safety a lot more seriously than you should, you used to do. So I spent maybe 20 years, 25 years as a self-employed kind of little electrical company.
Yep.
Then we had a bit of a life event. My father died, and I kind of went off on a little bit of a, it hit me hard when my father died, and I thought, oh, I've had enough of it. It just affected me psychologically, and I ended up going to work for a company then on the books, which was a really weird experience because I hadn't worked on the books since I kind of like left mining. And I found out that when I were as a self-employed person, moving into a PAYE environment, an employed environment, I was so much keener to work hard than everyone else around me, because the employed mental attitude and the self-employed attitude, I think, no disrespect to employees, but it's different because you've got that mindset that I've got to get this done. I've got to get it right first time because I need to get paid and I need to move on to my next job and I need to get a recommendation. So that mindset and the thinking ahead, planning the tools, what will I need when I'm going to do this? How much material will I need? It's all, you don't realize that you've actually got that kind of knowledge. That's just built up. It's just amounted over the years. So I stayed in employment for about 3 years. Um, and then I wanted to move into management basically. So I did. I got the necessary qualifications to kind of like be a site manager and that kind of thing. Um, and then I got employed by a bigger electrical company as a project manager. And then I worked my way up through numerous employed positions to like contracts manager. But every time I was inside another business, I always felt that the ideas I was trying to present to get things done quicker and faster and more efficiently were always fought or objected back to from above.
Hmm.
It's almost like you were threatening people by the ideas that you were presenting. Um, so ultimately, I thought, sod it, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go back on my own again because
Hmm.
then I can only argue with myself then.
Hmm.
So the productivity side of things, it's come from that. It's come from early days, from the mindset of being a self-employed man, where every penny counts. And I saw amongst bigger companies, and the bigger the company, the worse it is. The waste is incredible. The waste and the materials that get wasted, guys standing around doing nothing, waiting for supervision, waiting for instruction. And I just thought this is nonsense. So I started up again on my own and I built up again a really successful electrical contracting business that I still run today. But it's so automated and organised that it only takes a couple of days a week of my time.
Hmm.
And lots of people kept saying to me, Dave, how come you can get this done so fast? How come this is happening? How come we don't have this trouble? We have different problems with different contractors, but with you, it's all kind of sorted and it's all done and it's all efficient and effective and we make money and you make money. And I thought, and then they're saying, well, can you show us how you do that? And again, I didn't know that I knew this stuff, but
Hmm.
obviously it's not common. Well, at least in the circles that I've been moving in, it's not that common. So that's where they were all born from. And so I set up a consultancy then, um, just as a side gig, really. Just because, I'm really passionate about the productivity side of things because I find it really interesting. I'm a bit of a data geek and a bit of a spreadsheet geek.
Hmm.
And so I measure everything and time everything. And so when someone asks me, we've got 50 meters of ladder rack to put up at 15 meters high, I know the figures. I've got the numbers. I know how long it takes. I know how many men it takes. I know all that. Yeah, it's all documented so that it's like massive lessons learned exercises after each project builds up this catalogue almost of data and information so that you can actually price things properly. Um, so that's how it kind of developed. And I've only been doing it kind of 12 months, the consultancy, but it's going quite well at the moment. So what I do these days is, well, you might, if you look at my LinkedIn posting, it's all about trying to find waste, productivity waste within organisations.
Yeah.
Most directors can't see how much money is just bleeding out of the business every year, and the fixes are so simple, and it's a matter of measurement really. So that's my kind of journey to today.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, that it's I mean, it's a really interesting story. It actually paints a clear picture, I guess, as to where, how you think, how you get all that experience. And so I know you had sent me maybe a few topics, and the first one was that was interesting was access. So um so I guess, how often is the job priced one way, but it ends up being done another way once you're on the site. And when we're talking about, whether it's ladders or scaffold or whatever, like let's just talk about access as one of those points where you really picked out that there's some intersection between productivity and safety. And
Yeah,
how
because
did
I think most estimating departments, especially in bigger organisations, they've got no real data to work from when they're actually costing jobs. Um, so they'll just have a set of bits of information either from experience or from some documentation they've got. It'll be out of date, it'll be rubbish. But they'll have a kind of it's 15 quid an hour to do this, it's 25 pound an hour to do that per meter, etc. So they'll price it off that. But then the reality is that there's scaffolding required, or there's mutes required, mobile extendable working platforms required, and they won't factor that in because the estimating department is kind of isolated from the operations department. So the operations will go to site and see the conditions and what they're up against. But the estimating department, which were 3 months ago, this is 3 months before the job even kicks off, uh,
Mhm,
haven't had that information or aren't aware of that information. So it's a planning issue both ways. Productivity is all about planning, and health and safety should be, or I'm assuming, is all about planning as well. But they're two different streams within an organisation, and very rarely does one department talk to the other. Health and safety, in my experience, has always been a necessary evil, and that's how it's been viewed. So the health and safety guy is kind of the guy who you don't want to see, you don't want to talk to, because he's just going to get you in trouble. And that's where I think it breaks down at the very beginning. It's communication within businesses,
mhm,
which is poor. Um, so a typical example would be the estimators price the job to be done off of step ladders, but when you get to site, you find out that step ladders aren't allowed because the mini contractor won't allow them, or you can only work off step ladders. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in this country, you can only work off step ladders for very short durations of a few minutes, which is kind of impractical. So then you're looking at different forms of access, and that different form of access might be more expensive. It's necessary for health and safety, but it's now more expensive. So the estimate was always wrong because
mhm,
two departments never talk to each other. Um, the time it takes to do tasks, if you've got mobile scaffolding, for example, and you're having to move it around every time you've done a couple of meters of work at eye level, you've got to get down, move it along, get back up. It all adds to the time scales that are required to do the task at hand.
mhm.
But if that had been addressed at the very beginning through good communication, um, then it could have been avoided, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, because I was even just writing something today about how a lot of incidents happen when people are under time crunches. And the thing is if you go into a job and you haven't planned to put scaffold up and all that stuff, I mean, that's just going to take more time. So now, on top of the cost to do that, you're also maybe rushing, everything's, you're kind of increasing the risk of something happening. So definitely, starting to see that for sure. So that I thought it was interesting what you mentioned about um, toolbox talks.
Yeah,
And
it's my pet hate. Yeah.
yeah, and and how some of the and most of them are just kind of a formality. They don't actually change, how people are working. So, what are some of your thoughts on that? I thought it was really interesting.
Well, I've delivered countless toolbox talks myself, and I've been the recipient of countless toolbox talks myself. And it's here we go again, slips, trips, and falls. It's the usual, oh, here we go again kind of attitude. Everybody's on the phone, looking at the phone, and not really paying attention. because it's boring. And yeah, we know, we've heard it 1,000 times before. Blah blah blah. So everybody signs the sheet at the end of the toolbox talk, and that's 15 minutes for, let's say, a 6-man crew or a 10-man crew for easy maths. That's 150 man hours just gone at £45 per hour or whatever it is you're charging. You charge outrageous for your man. That's just been a complete and utter waste of your time, the business's time, and the guy's time, because they've not really learned anything from it. But if what I try to do now, or what I propose, I ask my project managers to do, etc., is to combine the toolbox talk to make it, to set the day up. So it's like it's setting the tasks ahead. So we're thinking productivity wise, but we're addressing the health and safety concerns at the same time by saying, for example, you're going to be working in area B. You'll be working off a mobile scaffolding. So remember this and remember this and remember this and remember this. So you're actually delivering the toolbox talk, but in an applied way. It's, yes, they understand, they can see it in their mind's eye what they're going to be doing. And then if you've already pre-scoped the job, obviously there may be whatever ob- ob- obstacles are in the way that they need to be aware of. It's kind of like it's a toolbox talk, but delivered in a way that actually makes sense in reality. It's a bit like applied maths. It's like learning trigonometry. You think, well, what on earth is trigonometry going to do for me? Until you understand from electrical engineering that trigonometry is a very important thing. So it's applied trigonometry then, isn't it? So you kind of think, yeah, I see why I'm doing this now. It makes sense. And it's a little bit, that's my philosophy when it comes to the toolbox talk, is to combine not only this is what I want doing today, guys, and this is why when I want it doing by, because I know what the metrics behind all that is and what the profit margin is, but I also want you to do it safely, and this is how we will be doing it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's a great idea. I was trying to think of how I could even incorporate that idea into some of the things we do, because it is um like just something we kind of promote in the electrical space is doing a job briefing, very similar to a toolbox, but it is specific to that job, but it's not so much on the productivity side. It's 100% on the safety side. And no, that's a fantastic idea. So one question I guess I had was, is anyone measuring the how the quality of these toolbox talks correlates with actual incident rates or anything like that? Like, have you thought about that before?
Yeah, that's what again on the topics I sent you. I've kind of wrote a few questions below each topic because I'm not aware of the actual outcomes from implementing toolbox talks, for example. So there must be statistics out there that what percentage of toolbox talk content is actually remembered. Does
Yeah.
anybody know that? And is anybody measuring whether not giving a toolbox talk or giving a toolbox talk actually has any impact on site safety? Is there any correlation between doing toolbox talks and site incidents?
Hmm.
I, I don't know the answer to that personally. I would imagine some of your guys in the group would kind of have the finger on that, but it's not something, because I'm not health and safety focused, in that's not my area of expertise in that sense.
Right.
It's not data that I look for. It's just that
Well,
I understand health and safety is an obligation on all of us. But I
yeah,
was
I
like,
mean,
oh, I just don't want to waste 15 minutes on a morning
yeah,
for 10 men just telling
yeah,
them what they heard last week.
yeah. No, that's so I mean, just something that I've found over time is that so I'm in Canada. Um the data we have is not very good. So every province kind of has its own data, and even one example is let's say that someone is injured, they're working on a step ladder, they get a shock, they fall off the ladder. it's recorded as a fall off of a ladder. It's not even recorded as a shock. And so to think that our data is strong enough to actually dig in and also find, how does that correlate to their toolbox talks? I think we're a long way from having any good information on that. Um, I think there's probably been some independent studies where, I've seen some information where basically that if you actually have an electrical safety program that, and I would just say that people are talking about. So if you've established that culture where you're talking about safety, it's on people's minds. Um, I'm sure that incidents are going down. Um, the thing is though that now I'm talking to the productivity guy. I've worked at places where I'm also sure that the productivity has gone, you know, not in the right direction and to the point where it's too much. So they're almost being so safe that they're not doing the work. Right. So
No,
it's like try to
yeah.
find the balance that um but I know I really like the idea on the toolbox talks that you're incorporating here's what we're actually doing today and here's how to
I mean,
here
just to kind of like touch touch on what you've said there. In my experience as a project manager, um, the amount of time I used to spend telling guys to put the hard hat on is absolutely incredible. For some reason, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the UK, nobody wants to wear the hard hat.
hmm
So, and I know there can be a bit of a ball ache when you're bending over and it's dropping off and it's red hot outside and you're sweating and all the rest of it. But it's just a requirement of sites and why people struggle to implement the simplest of tasks, which is wear a hard hat or put your goggles on
hmm
or your glasses, is just, we wonder then why bigger accidents happen more in more dangerous situations when you're actually messing with electricity. If you can't get a guy to keep his hat on, where are we? What chance have we got of actually making health and safety stick?
no, that's I mean just from what I've seen uh that it's I feel like in Canada safety's been pushed pretty hard, so you're probably hard pressed to find people working where they should be working with hard hats without them. But even, like just driving around town, there's people up on roofs, they're not wearing fall arrest. Like I still see that. So it's definitely it's definitely not 100% compliance everywhere. And I guess too, earlier you were kind of talking about when you were, first starting out and you had your own business and you're on your own dime. Actually, that was kind of what I was thinking about is so it, money obviously plays a factor in a lot of this stuff. And the message that I've seen from a lot of safety people is that you're going to save time and you're going to save money um, in the long run, let's say. Or if you have an incident, well, obviously that's not going to save you any time and it's not going to save you any money. Um, I think a lot of these people, though, think that they're just not going to have an incident or they're almost hoping that they're not going to have an incident. So have you, whether it's in your own experience, like wh- where does that, where does that cross over that you could look like, how could you make the case just to someone that you actually can improve productivity through safety? Like, have you seen it enough that there is an argument there?
Yeah, yeah, I think I can. I'm just trying to think of an example. But if you've got if you've got the right gear, then you're obviously going to be able to do the job a lot better than if you've got three broken spanners. It's kind of, if you've got the right gear to do the job, the whole idea is that it'll do it more efficiently and more effectively. Um, when it comes to access and scaffold and working at heights, especially, you can't fly, so you've got to have some kind of access. And it's picking the best access to make the job the best it can be, which is, we're back to the old communication issue between departments, between health and safety thinking, I must enforce this, and
Mm-hmm.
people on the other side going, I must resist this for whatever reason psychologically. But if we can get both sides talking to each other a lot more, not just saying, oh, well, I'll show you 10 accidents that happened last year because of this. Well, you're just preaching at people all the time rather than
Mm-hmm.
kind of like bringing it down to man level. Look, you've got to work safely. Let's find the best way to do this job safely. What I'll use my knowledge from on health and safety and safety equipment. You know how to do the job. Let's blend the two together and come up together with the best solution. Don't
Mm-hmm.
make me do something that I know to be inefficient and OTT. Let's work together and find the right solution to do the job the best it can be done safely. If that, I think that's where the dichotomy is. It's between the two disciplines. One's health
Yeah.
and safety. Yes, I want you to go on the same state that you arrived this morning, but I also need to make money at middle. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
none of us have got a job.
So if we just think through like some of the most successful, um, maybe it could just be in your own experience or anything, just from a purely productivity standpoint. So things that you know are going on in every organization. It doesn't have to impact safety at all. Just think of the from a productivity standpoint. What I kind of want to get at is, how is it that you go into a situation? What are the things you're looking for, and and then how do you improve that productivity? And yeah, just think of maybe an example there for people. Um, and then I might be able to tie it back to safety if it goes in the right direction here. But just
It's well, practically speaking, it's very simple. All a man or an electrician needs is the right tools, the right information, and the right training and the right supervision to do his job. Whenever an operative turns up to start a day's work and any of those things are missing, then you're instantly on the back foot. So if he turns up and he's not got the proper instructions, what am I doing today? What do you expect me to do today? How am I going to do what I'm going to do today? And how will I know if I've done a good job today?
hmm
That is, and have I got the right tools and the right equipment and information to perform the task you've just asked me to do? It sounds very simple. The supervisor's job or the PM's job is to take away all the problems that a man has, or all the obstacles in the way of the man, so the man can produce get through the most productive hours he can get through. Instead of coming up to the PM and saying, I can't do this because this is missing or that's missing. I can't do this because I can't get in there because another trade's in there. I can't do this because I'm spending 10 minutes walking backwards and forwards to the van to get nuts and bolts or whatever it is I'm getting. Um, the project manager's job or the supervisor's job is to make sure that all that stuff is pre-planned. So the guy turns up to work and he goes, what am I doing? You tell him what he's doing. You tell him what you expect him to achieve. And then you say, there you go. There's all the bits and pieces. Any questions?
hmm
None. But if he turns up and he's constantly coming to you, what do I do here? What do I do there? What about this? What about that? It's all about planning and knowing that the man just needs a coal face to work at and the tools to work at the coal face with the right instructions. That's it. It's nothing more complicated than that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually. I was going to say that's actually perfectly kind of where I was going with this because if you were just to add in, you mentioned instructions. So when we're talking about electrical safety, there's there's really, let's say, two things that you ever have to really worry about. One is, how do I de-energize this so that I can work de-energized? And the other one would be in a manufacturing setting or oil and gas or something like that, where you're trouble, or I guess there's all kinds of industries you'd be troubleshooting. But if you're troubleshooting, then it's just knowing how to do the troubleshooting. So from a instructional point of view, like that's that's really it. Um, and then you mentioned having the right tools. Well, you could say you're having the right PPE available as well, because when the stuff's turned on, you have to be wearing PPE. That's pretty much it. And then if all of those productivity things are in place and all of the assumptions have been taken away, you are reducing the chances of anything going wrong significantly. Like the safety incidents rarely happen because the electrician didn't know technically what to do. That almost that's almost never the case. There might be some incidents where you have someone who's not an electrician who have found themselves into a panel and they're doing something that they don't know how to do. But rarely is it an electrician that doesn't know what they're doing. Usually it's they have assumed something, they're rushing, they didn't lock it out when they should have. They're not wearing their PPE when they should have. But again, it's usually tied to rushing through the work or just not understanding, like you mentioned, training, not understanding, like, well, when do you need to wear this and when do you not? So yeah, I think if you and then even kind of going back to talking about the toolbox talks and how does that correlate? Probably all of those things correlate and all of them go hand in hand.
It's planning,
Um,
and if the project manager or the supervisor is not doing his or her job correctly, and they're just constantly firefighting, then
mhm,
how can we expect the workforce to work productively? Because without any of those bits of information that I mentioned at the beginning, then you're leaving it to the operative to make his mind up. You're leaving it to the operative to make the decision, or he's going to keep coming back and asking you, which makes the project manager inefficient and ineffective. So it's a kind of vicious circle, and it comes from the top. It's a cascading failure model, I call it. Productivity. Trouble on the coal face just filters back up to the top, and then pressure from the top comes back down to the coal face, and it ends up with all the symptoms you've just said: rushing, cutting corners, cost cutting, or trying to cost cut, and it just cycles back up again. Coal face chaos, feeding uphill, pressure feeding downhill, and that's the model, or the that's what I see 9 times out of 10 when I step into a business to look at it, at a granular level.
yeah.
Everybody's kind of good and great guys, and everybody's got the right attitude, and everybody wants to be safe. But in all honesty, they're not trained very well. That's my personal impression.
Mhm,
Everybody says they're a project manager, but there are good ones and there are bad ones. The world's full of electricians, but there's very few good ones and a lot of
mhm,
kind of average ones. All the gear and no idea, we say in this country. Um, so it is. It's a training. We're back to a training thing as well, where I did a little study recently on American M&E businesses, and the top 5% um, spend 30% more on training than operatives, but get 75% more revenue per man.
mhm.
It's kind of, it works, and not just the compliance training, actual
Yeah.
proper training. So
Well,
training
I mean,
works.
you can just yeah, if you just think it through, you can just see it because if you you picture the chaos and imagine just walking up to one of those individuals who's in the middle of a chaotic day and then saying, "Oh yeah, probably should have some Mark Flash clothes and some gloves." They can't even imagine probably trying to add that to their day. Well, how am I going to figure out that, and how am I going to pay for it? And that's going to take more time to put it on. And I got to take it off, and like, right. But if everything is planned and put in place properly, adding another step here and there in the plan isn't that,
It isn't,
as
no,
long as
and
it makes it doesn't,
the health and safety department of any business should be working hand in hand with the operations department to make sure that we get an efficient and safe workplace. Why it's just health and safety, the industry is just viewed as a negative. That's what I think personally.
it's been pretty good so far, and we're kind of coming up on time here. But was there anything else that you wanted to share with the group, or even just if there isn't, that's fine. But maybe just you could tell everybody if they want to get a hold of you, how they do that, and
It would be interesting. I mean, I will follow the podcast now, and obviously there must be a way we can chip in with questions and for people. And I think digging into some of these data sets about the effectiveness or not of things like toolbox talks, training, that kind of thing. Just really want to encourage people in who've got their own businesses or working, £3 to £6 million revenue kind of businesses. That's my kind of ICP. Um, Communication is king every time. Talk, communicate, collaborate. All that makes for a more efficient machine than when everybody's fighting each other. And that will be the only message I've got for anybody really. Communication is king.
perfect. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.